Another night of big breaking news in Washington. A White House shakeup after reports of major infighting in recent days. President Trump has ousted his chief of staff, Reince Priebus, and replaced him with Homeland Security Chief General John Kelly. The announcement comes a week after the president appointed a new communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, who accused Priebus of trying to keep him out of the West Wing in a fiery interview. Here was the president on his decision earlier.
Reince is a good man. John Kelly will do a fantastic job. General Kelly has been a star, done an incredible job thus far, respected by everybody. A great, great American. Reince Priebus, a good man. Thank you very much.
More details now from Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry.
Jesse, Reince Priebus gets some credit for helping elect President Trump, providing critical ground game for the campaign, but has not had anywhere near those kinds of results in terms of major legislation. And it's worth noting he's out mere hours after a major failure on health care. In some ways, the president was never fully in sync with his chief of staff, dating back to Priebus's days as chairman of the RNC, when he urged the GOP nominee in October to get out of the race because of that Access Hollywood tape. The president sometimes tweaked Priebus about that in private, and the tension only grew after the arrival of Anthony Scaramucci 1 week ago today over the strong objections of Priebus and his RNC loyalist, Sean Spicer, who quickly resigned. Interesting, if Priebus did not see the handwriting on the wall, then it was written in giant letters last night when we learned of that Scaramucci interview with the New Yorker magazine, in which he savaged Priebus by calling him, among other things, a bleeping paranoid schizophrenic. Awkward, then, that Priebus and Scaramucci were on Air Force One together today before this was revealed. And when the news broke as the president was getting off the plane, Priebus's vehicle suddenly left the motorcade. Got a bit awkward. Priebus is now saying he secretly resigned yesterday, and tonight he put out a statement that said that it was one of the greatest honors of his life to serve under the president. And then he told our own Sean Hannity this.
I think actually going a different direction, hitting a reset button is a good thing. And the president did that, and so I think he's happy. I got to tell you, although it's always a little mixed when things like this happen, I generally feel pretty good.
He will be succeeded by General John Kelly, who had Washington experience before serving in this cabinet. He ran legislative affairs for the Marine Commandant, and he was a senior military aide to 2 secretaries of defense. Kelly saying, quote, "I have been fortunate to have served my country for more than 45 years, first as a Marine and then as a Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. I'm honored to be asked to serve as the Chief of Staff to the President of the United States." The key is we're being told tonight that General Kelly has been empowered to control the flow of people and paper in and out of the Oval Office. He starts Monday, when there will be a cabinet meeting as well to reboot things in the administration. Jesse, guys.
Ed, thanks very much. So Ed touches on something interesting. Reince did a fantastic job leading the RNC. I mean, really brought them back from oblivion, raised a ton of money, helped get Donald Trump elected. But as chief of staff, didn't really deliver on Obamacare repeal, couldn't stop the leaks, was involved in helping Mueller be the special prosecutor. Do you believe he deserved to be ousted?
Well, I think on the other hand, it's funny because just last week, as the White House entered into its 6-month anniversary or mark, they were basically beating the drum, saying, "Look at how great we've done. The president has done more than any president in the history of the United States, and look at all these amazing things." So, I mean, I think that if you're Reince Priebus, you could look at it both ways, right? And I do think that the Obamacare thing is
right.
probably something where, and even apparently he even said that was like kind of an internal marker for him.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he did not have the full backing of the president, nor did he have then, because of that, the full confidence of the staff,
right,
nor the cabinet, I would imagine, then he was basically not able to function and do his job. And the best thing, I guess, for everybody is for him to move on. I think the selection of General John Kelly is really good for all sorts of reasons that we can talk about here, the chain of command, public servant. He has the respect of the president. But also, this is a White House that is about to, is facing, but will increasingly face very hostile regimes. North Korea today testing another missile, possibly an ICBM. You have Iran and all of this, the idea, this possibility that they sent up a satellite into space. That is new. And also, he used to be Southern Command and knows a lot about things in South America, and Venezuela is heating up. So Not that he names another national security advisor, but the fact that the chief of staff now has great command of those issues is really good.
It seems like everybody believes that Kelly is an excellent choice. Greg, Trump's firing more people at the White House than he did on The Apprentice. That may have worked on The Apprentice. It worked in real estate. It's definitely worked in the primaries and the general election. He cut a lot of people loose. Is it working now at this point?
Well, the good news is Spicer and Reince can now do Dancing with the Stars as a pair.
Yeah.
So I think that's beautiful. And I think it's a nice twist on this kind of firing is that Hannity now does all of the exit interviews, which is really good. I do think, you know, Donald Trump does remind me of somebody. He reminds me of President Obama. He had 5 chiefs of staffs. He had 3 chief of staffs in under 3 years. The point is, I looked that up on Wikipedia because I don't really remember. I don't remember his chief of staffs. I don't even care.
I just remember Rom.
Yeah, I remember well because
he spoke like Scaramucci.
And also, yes, it's true. And he was a ballet dancer. But I mean, you know,
Did you look at the Wikipedia for that too?
I always do. But my point is, people talking about White House staffing changes are like guys talking about fantasy football trades. If you're not that into it, and we do this for a living, so we have to be kind of into it. But I don't think anybody's going to care about this. This is a guy who you know, treats staffing the way he always does. If he uses you until he uses you, he's a difficult boss. And difficult bosses are hard to read until they decide that they don't want you around. And then he does this thing where it's like he doesn't fire you. It's like a guy in a relationship who wants to get out of it, so he'd prefer if you dumped him. So he just stops talking to you. And then after a while,
he's a total jerk.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's normal. And the happiest person in D.C. is Scaramucci because you know, his language was saltier than a sweaty pretzel. And that's all we were talking about, and now we're talking about this.
Now I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Juan, what do the Democrats think of Kelly coming in? Because he's really going to institute a lot more discipline, has a lot more authority, is going to control the access to the president. How do you guys take this?
Well, I don't know. I'm not speaking for Democrats, but I'll tell you how I see it. I mean, to me, I don't think it makes much difference because I think President Trump's in charge, and he seems to enjoy the chaos. And don't forget, a lot of this, the things that you were talking about, Jesse, like controlling the flow of people into the Oval Office, how are you going to tell his son-in-law, the president's son-in-law, you can't go in there? How are you going to tell his daughter, hey, you're not? Right.
They have open access.
They have open access. You can't fire them. So they're operating in their own sphere, even though they're in the White House.
Right.
And then, and I think, Greg, this is the big news to me. I mean, there's a reason it's not just like any other president switching a chief of staff. This has been a week of seismic feuding, I mean, to the point of dysfunction in the White House. I mean, and think about the consequences of it. I think this business about, oh, health care failed, so Priebus is out. You must have missed all that happened the rest of the time because it's been fireworks. I mean, just this week, Sessions has said, I'm not leaving. If you want to fire me, this goes back to what Greg said, if you want to fire me, but I'm not going anywhere despite all your tweets. You think about the Pentagon saying to him on the transgender front, we'll do a study, but we're not banning transgender people like you want. And then, of course, you have the whole business with the Boy Scouts, and the Boy Scouts having to put out an apology. It's been a terrifically turbulent week, and the Scaramucci...
Oh, wait, you forgot there's a new press secretary, too.
Yeah, and the Scaramucci stuff, it was out of control. I wish Greg had been here for that.
I might be the only one.
In spirit.
Yes.
What about you, Lisa?
I was drunk.
Oh, I'm actually disappointed that Secretary Kelly is leaving that post. I just thought he was such a perfect pick for Homeland Security Secretary. As Dana mentioned, former command of the Southern Command, having served in Central America as well as South America, also having served in Iraq. I just thought he was so perfect for that job. So I'm actually really disappointed for him to leave that post. And what I do worry about, as Greg mentioned, the turnover that we saw under President Obama. We've seen a lot of turnover under President Trump, and I certainly hope that doesn't happen to someone who has so dutifully served this country for 45 years. But look, I mean, I think the writing was on the wall for Priebus with Scaramucci being brought in and Sean Spicer being pushed out. I think President Trump felt like the establishment wing of the Republican Party was never with him. I think he associates Priebus and Spicer with that wing of the party, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see some more firings.
Let's listen to what Reince said about the exit. Roll the tape.
I'm going to be on Team Trump all the time. I'll always be out there trying to help the president advance his goals, support him as a friend, too. And that's the other part of the job that people don't realize. You actually become friends you know, when you go through thick and thin together, you get to know people really well, and he's a good man, and I was honored to be able to serve him.
Reince is definitely taking a classy way out there, and you can see that full interview 10 p.m. Eastern on Hannity. Lisa touched on this for a little bit. So Trump seems to be clearing out the political people, the RNC people. He's bringing in military people. He's bringing in the money men. He feels very comfortable around the brass, around the billionaires or the millionaires. What do you think that says about Trump?
I'm not sure.
And his new direction.
Well, I think that they still have plenty of competition for ideas in the White House, because you have the National Economic Council that is in one area. You have Steve Bannon's shop. Kellyanne Conway is working on to fulfill her duties, and then you've got McMaster and those guys at the National Security Council. I think what's really interesting is what's about to happen. I'm going to go out and say this. I think that this was all set up for a few weeks because the president has been so upset about Jeff Sessions and his recusal in the Russia investigation that the Republicans and conservatives that came to Jeff Sessions' defense this week all said, but he's doing the best on the issue we care about the most, and that is immigration. Well, where can Jeff Sessions do even more on immigration as the Secretary of Homeland Security? So I think that what they're going to try to do is move
and everyone else
Sessions over to DHS, and then how can the conservatives complain? And then you have a new AG, he thinks, can then fire Mueller.
Wow, you heard it here first.
So wait. Trump is playing Yahtzee and everybody else is playing Boggle.
Hungry hippos.
Can I ask, but you asked what you asked. I think that there's also something about Donald Trump's past that plays a role in his present. And that is that he went to a New York military academy because he was getting into some fights and some scrapes. And what changed him was a military academy. So I think that a major influence in his life is a general, is somebody that gives you order and discipline and routine. And hopefully maybe that will work, because it wouldn't hurt him to have a little bit more control over some of the things. I just don't know if that's possible.
And he walked all over Priebus from what we hear.
Well, it's also interesting, too, because one of the big knocks against President Trump during the election was that he wouldn't take the advice of counsel, that he wouldn't listen to his advisors. But what we have seen, as you mentioned, he has surrounded himself with a lot of brass, whether people who are CEOs of Exxon or generals, people that have served, people that have run something and run something successfully. And so I find that to be very interesting, because it actually turned out to be the exact opposite in terms of him surrounding himself with people that are very accomplished, that can do the job on their own, and to some degree has allowed them to do that role.
Well, last word. I just want to pick up on what Dana was talking about with the possible shuffling of chairs, because I don't think the bloodletting is over. There's every indication coming out of Washington that Rex Tillerson's not happy at state and looking the other way. And not only that, that the H.R. McMaster, National Security Advisor, not plugged in on this business about what was going to be a ban on transgender individuals and the questions about how the national security shop is functioning. You take that with the idea that Steve Bannon is just kind of drifting in the wind, because gosh, Scaramucci really said awful things about physically impossible acts that he was committing.
It's not physically impossible.
Well, I'll leave that to you, my friend. But I will say this, that Bannon can't be in a good place with Scaramucci there and McMaster and what you see now with Kelly coming in to run the shop. But I will say this about Kelly being there. I think there's a great deal of worry right now in the intelligence community in this country as to what happens in a crisis. Is the White House dysfunction mean that we really won't be able to handle it? And hopefully Kelly will reassure some people.
And there could be a crisis around the corner with North Korea.